Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. If you've been to your local Costco lately, you've seen the newest bestseller by Iris and Roy Johansen sitting on the book table. And if you walk into the average Barnes & Noble, you'll see rows and rows of Iris and Roy Johansen and Iris Johansen solo best-selling titles taking up their own section of shelves. Dating back over 40 years, generations of readers grew up grabbing her books off grocery store and five and dime store paperback spin racks, airport bookstores, and just about everywhere else you could buy books throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Beginning with her Ceticon series, which kicked off her career way back in 1981 with The Golden Valkyrie. It then expanded into her first best-selling series over sequels like The Trustworthy Redhead, Capture the Rainbow, Touch the Horizon, A Summer Smile, and The Desert Blooms. Always everlasting. Till the End of Time, Last Bridge Home, Across the River of Yesterday, Starlight, Star Bright, Man from Half Moon Bay, Blue Skies and Shining Promises, Magnificent Folly, Notorious, and A Tough Man to Tame through the 1980s, along with her standalone novels like Stormy Vows, Tempest at Sea, Reluctant Lark, The Bronze Hawk, The Lady and the Unicorn, Return to Santa Flores, No Red Roses, White Satin, Blue Velvet, The Forever Dream, Spellbinder, Strong Hot Winds, Wicked Jake Darcy, One Touch of Topaz, An Unexpected Song, Tender Savage, Winter Bride and Star Spangled Bride. The Wind Dancer series would carry her into her second decade in the 1990s as a successful novelist over the self-titled Wind Dancer and sequels Storm Winds, Reap the Wind, and Final Target, along with carving out a lane for herself in historical fiction in the historical fiction section of the bookstore with Last Bridge Home, The Tiger Prince, The Magnificent Rogue, Midnight Warrior, The Beloved Scoundrel and Dark Rider, York the Renegade, Matilda the Adventuress, and the Delaney series over This Fierce Splendor, Wild Silver, Satin Ice, and the Delaney Christmas Carol. At the same time, Iris churned out a library of standalone titles of more contemporary variety across several genres over the later 1990s and 2000s, through The Ugly Duckling, Long After Midnight, And Then You Die, No One to Trust, Fatal Tide, Fire, On the Run, Killer Dreams, Pandora's Daughter, Dark Summer, Deadlock, The Perfect Witness, No Easy Target, and Chaos. Demonstrating her dynamic range next when she successfully shifted lanes into writing romantic suspense and thrillers, introducing fans to Eve Duncan, who the New York Times described as the longtime heroine, a forensic sculptor with a tragic past who anchored a widely successful best-selling series run that began with The Face of Deception in 1998 and 25 years of hits since with The Killing Game, which USA Today was already featuring on their hot books on sale this week, counting Iris Johansen's Hunting Eve, the second part of her Eve Duncan series, as one of their most anticipated, which took off over The Search, Body of Lies, Deadly Aim, Blind Alley, Countdown, Stalemate, Quicksand, Blood Game, 8 Days to Live, Chasing the Night, Eve, Quinn, Bonnie, Sleep No More, Taking Eve, Hunting Eve, Silencing Eve, Shadow Play, Hide Away, Night and Day, Mind Game, Shattered Mirror, Vendetta, and Dark Tribute, well into the 2000s and 2020s, more recent hits like Smokescreen, The Persuasion, The Bullet, A Face to Die For, which the New York Journal of Books promised was a well-structured story with lots of action that Iris Johansen fans will enjoy, Captive, and The Survivor. The Catherine Ling series also proved popular with Chasing the Night, What Doesn't Kill You, Live to See Tomorrow, Your Next Breath, and Vendetta. By then, Iris' son Roy Johansen had successfully launched his own writing career, first winning the Edgar Allan Poe Award from the Mystery Writers of America in Best Television Miniseries or Movie category for his Pierce Brosnan starring Murder 101 screenplay. Then working with Stan Lee on creating the Accuser superhero comic book character, and on bookshelves delivering a standalone hit with The Answer Man, the Joe Bailey Spirit Basher duology with Beyond Belief and Deadly Visions, before teaming up with his mother Iris to begin co-writing bestsellers together, first on the 2009 standalone novel Storm Cycle, then the Hannah Bryson duology over Silent Thunder and Shadow Zone, before inventing together a new series starring Kendra Michaels, who has since anchored bestsellers like Close Your Eyes, Sight Unseen, The Naked Eye, Night Watch, Look Behind You, Double Blind, Hindsight, Blink of an Eye, Killer View, More Than Meets the Eye, and Flashback. And mother and son join us both today to talk about the family business of writing. Iris, Roy, welcome to the show. Iris, long before you began writing novels, what could fans have found you reading as a child?
principally. I was a library freak who uh, went to the library at least once a week and sometimes more. Uh, and I just grew to love it. And of course, you pick up everything along the way. Um, you read a book, Tarzan of the Apes, and all of a sudden you're right there with all the gorillas, et cetera, and so forth.
Now, Roy, when you were a kid, had the storytelling influences you grew up around broadened beyond just books to include TVs and movies that all of us 80s kids experienced together between Star Wars and Steven Spielberg and John Carpenter and Stephen King and everyone else who entertained us with stories back then?
My earliest memories of storytelling were stories that mom would tell me when I was an infant. And then I grew to become a voracious reader, and she had a lot to do with instilling that in me. We were, yeah, every weekend we'd go to the library and go to the used bookstores and come back with arms loads of books, and so I was very much a reader. I grew to have a love of film as I got a little bit older. And also, all those films of the '80s were huge favorites of mine too, and the Star Wars and the Indiana Jones and then I just movies in general. And so I started later writing screenplays as a result of that. And then it was only a bit after that that I turned to novel writing.
Iris, how important was it for you while you were raising your kids to impart your love of stories onto them? Especially given the irony of what you would both go on to do professionally in that realm.
It was a matter of course. And, and actually, Roy has a fantastic memory. So he as he grew up, he was able to remember things that I had no conception that I told him. But it was all family. That's what it was. And yes, we were all movie buffs too. Would have family movie nights every week and talk about them and sometimes took off school to go to see the latest one. Do you remember that?
Oh, opening day of Empire Strikes Back and opening day of
Absolutely.
Return of the Jedi. We That was an off school days for both for all of us. Yeah.
Iris, when you first decided to give what's become the family business a try over 4 decades ago, you landed on store shelves and paperback spin racks right out of the gate with your Sedicon series back in 1981 with The Golden Valkyrie, launching your first remarkably prolific era as a published author over The Golden Barbarian, The Trustworthy Redhead, Capture the Rainbow, Touch the Horizon, A Summer Smile, and The Desert Blooms, Always, Everlasting, Till the End of Time, Last Bridge Home, Across the River Yesterday, Starlight Star Bright, Man from Half Moon Bay, Blue Skies and Shining Promises, Magnificent Folly, Notorious and a Tough Man to Tame by the end of the 1980s, along with the many standalone novels which we touched on at the top. When you look back, how do you remember those times inside your creative mind as you were turning out so many stories so prolifically in the first 10 years of your career?
Well, it was like being in another world. Uh, I I had surrounded myself by books and movies and and the stories just came alive for me, and it was and yes, Sedicon was one of the very early ones. But then I grew from there. You know, as you probably uh, know, I went from romances to historicals to oh, you name it, I wrote it.
Career-long fan of the Romantic Times once wrote that Johansen never disappoints, and you sure didn't let fans down with the Wind Dancer series, which launched you into the 1990s with bestsellers, including the self-titled debut, Storm Winds, Reap the Wind, and Final Target. What inspired the very interesting way in which you use time to help tell the stories contained in this long-time fan favorite series?
I'd been writing historicals, and then I just thought to myself, okay, let's go through the centuries and write a book for every century, and uh, and in that way I could hold on to the characters, and that's very important to a writer. You've got to hold on to the characters because it's they end up by writing the book, and I think almost every writer will tell you that I didn't really write that book. I just started in chapter 2, and all of a sudden they took over.
Speaking of a character who your fans went crazy for after she first walked onto the page and caught the attention of the New York Times, who by then had already begun to call your schedule daunting. The idea of producing 3 books in a year. Johansen has written at least 90 novels since 1983, and her new suspense novel, Taking Eve, enters the hardcover fiction list at number 5. The book features a longtime heroine, Eve Duncan, a forensic sculptor with a tragic past. Turning back several titles to the start of when readers first meet her in the early hits, like the debut of The Face of Deception in 1998, and successful sequels like The Killing Game, The Search, Body of Lies, Deadly Aim, Blind Alley, Countdown, Stalemate, Quicksand, Blood Game, 8 Days to Live, Chasing the Night, Eve, Quinn, Bonnie, and Sleep No More. What intrigued you specifically within her pedigree as a member of law enforcement that she'd specialize in forensic sculpting? And where could you take that specialized skill set into all of these fascinating storylines that followed?
I chose forensic sculpting because about that time I was watching a lot of things on TV about the career itself, and it was new back then. I hate to say that, but it was very new. And I thought, isn't that fascinating? I need to know more about it. So I started investigating the career itself. And then I thought that how it would affect a woman who was actually caught up with a daughter who had died. And it was, and it grew from there. The story just went into the other world.
Now, when you talk about that other world, as you continue to create it for yourself, Eve and readers over other hits like Hunting Eve, Silence Eve, Shadow Play, Hideaway, Night and Day, Mind Game, Shattered Mirror, Vendetta, and Dark Tribute. Could you give us a sense of how alive she becomes in your own imagination as you got to know her over the series, for instance? Did she, without sounding too cliche, almost become like a best friend?
She's my family. And and as you know, because I've written so many books about Eve, every time something happens to her, it's right there in front of me. I love them all. It's exciting, and it's I keep saying this, but it's true. It's when you're really deep in a book, it's another world, and sometimes it's not a pleasant world, and sometimes it's a very pleasant world. But it's definitely your world.
Joe Quinn and Jane McGuire have both become beloved members of that family among readers throughout the series. How important has that family unit been to giving Eve the balance she needs, case in and out?
I think it's because they probably felt that they were family too, and that's what I wanted. I wanted the people who I loved. I wanted them to be loved by the reader, and thank heavens that happened.
So, Roy, by now you'd embarked on your own successful screenwriting and book career, winning the Edgar Award as a screenwriter, and then launching your own solo noveling career with The Answer Man and the Joe Bailey Spirit Basher duology with Beyond Belief and Deadly Visions. Do you have a story from your early catalog that remains closest to your heart?
I have a great affection for The Answer Man, which is my first. That actually began life as a screenplay that I optioned to Warner Brothers and continued to option over the next few years, and it never got made. And finally, I got the rights back and decided to write a novel with the same basic story, and that was my first book. And I still like that a lot, and think about it.
Now, Iris, what was it like for you to see your son's name on the cover of his own book jacket, carrying on the family business from one generation to the next?
I loved it. I just loved it. It there's nothing like it that, and I can't claim anything to it about it because we did it, some of it together and some of it apart, but it just it's thrilling.
So when did you two first decide to team up the generations of Johansens here? First on Storm Cycle, with the American Library Association via booklist called a pulse-pounding adventure, intricate enough to satisfy tech-savvy geeks and hardcore adrenaline junkies alike. And then over the Hannah Bryson duology, with Silent Thunder and Shadow Zone.
The first time.
Oh, that was fun. You say, Bri, because really, you're the one that came to me on that particular book. Remember?
It was Silent Thunder. Yeah, that we had actually been writing by ourselves individually. Mom for about 15 years, and me for over 10 years. Me first screenwriting, and then novel writing, and Mom had, of course, had already been a hugely successful author of novels. And we talked about writing together, but we just never came up with a story that we felt like doing together. But I went to Chicago, the Museum of Science and Industry, and they have a submarine, a captured German submarine, on display there. And it looks pretty much as it did when the U.S. forces captured it. There was even bubblegum wrappers underneath the grating of the floor. Everything is preserved so perfectly. And I thought that just spurred something in me, and I came back and told Mom, I think I got it, a story for us. It was what about a woman who is charged with bringing in a decommissioned Soviet sub into her U.S. museum, and then discovering a secret about it that catapults her into an adventure. And we started playing, as we usually do, our game of what if, and pretty soon we had a whole story worked out, and that became our first book, Silent Thunder.
Now, you'd both seen your names individually on book covers by then. How much fun was it to then bridge the generations with Iris and Roy Johansen on the cover of your first book together?
That was very cool.
It's terrific. It's really different to write with someone rather than individually. It can be a little lonely for a little while, except if you embrace the characters in your books. But if you can sit down and talk to someone who thinks a lot like you, really, in a weird sort of way, and that makes a big difference.
With that foundation to build on, you two would construct the sort of durable series star in Kendra Michaels that would hook book readers from story one on and give birth to a New York Times best-selling series that's followed over the past 2 decades, beginning in Close Your Eyes, where we first meet Kendra and learn of her truly unique background to her investigative career that began with her being blind for the first 20 years of her life before she became a music therapist who now helps the FBI and occasionally CIA catch killers. Please take us inside the creation of this fascinating lead protagonist and talented investigator.
Well, we actually built the character together. I think Roy will agree with that. We'd start talking about it, and then all of a sudden, one of us would say, "Oh, but that's not right. We should do this," and it just grew and grew and grew.
I do have very specific memories. We saw the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie, the first one that he did a few years back. And at Christmas time, I was back home visiting, and we saw that movie together. And we left, and Mom was saying, we should write a character like that who can do like that. And by that, I think she was talking about the classic mystery detective who can walk into a room and sees and observes things that no one else can, and through their powers of observation and deduction. And I was a longtime Sherlock Holmes fan, so that really sounded great to me. I thought it'd be fun to create a character like that, but I wanted to give our character a reason, a unique reason for being able to have these powers of observation and deduction and everything. And that's where the idea of someone who had been blind for the first 20 years of her life, who gets the gift of sight thanks to a revolutionary surgical procedure, and she can use all the things that she used in the first 20 years of her life, as far as the way blind people use the sense of hearing and smell and touch and everything, to kind of compensate for the fact that they don't have sight. And so she walks into a crime scene and she uses all these things that she developed in the first 20 years of her life. But also, she doesn't take things for granted, because that she sees, because it's all new to her. And so she's very observant there too about the things she sees. And so we get that kind of classic detective in a way that we hoped would be kind of a new and unique slant.
Suspense Magazine would write, as the hits continued over sequels like Sight Unseen and The Naked Eye, that the read goes from good to great to spectacular as the hunt between predator and prey never stops. What kept this co-writing process most exciting for you two, creating all that action on the page? And could you give us a sense of how the back and forth worked for you, as you gave fans a generation of cases that they, Kendra and co, cracked together over Night Watch, Look Behind You, and Killer View?
If I wanted to write a particular chapter because I had an idea, then I'd tell him, and he'd do the same with me. And it there wasn't ever any arguing about it, because we both had a vision, and sometimes they combined and sometimes they did not combine. And at that point, we'd have a small disagreement, and then all of a sudden, everything would just click. Do you see it that way, Will?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we go back and forth in our writing. I mean, Mom will write maybe 70 or 80 pages, and I'll write the next chunk of pages, and we'll go back and forth, sometimes writing each other into a corner.
At that point, we'd have a small disagreement, and then all of a sudden, everything would just click.
But we usually we almost always come together and discuss it and work our way through it, which is actually surprisingly easy. I wasn't sure how that would work. We had written the first Kendra book already, and I'm not sure if it was even out yet by the time we decided to do the crossover. Kendra was a character we had just created. Mom had a very firm idea of, obviously, of Eve, since she'd already been in probably 10 or 11 books by that time. And so I had read the Eve books, but never participated in the writing of them. So it was interesting. This was an Irish book. I wasn't the co-author of it. I just I joined in just on the Kendra scenes on that book, and I helped out with some of her deductions and things like that. But the story, I was definitely in playing in Mom's sandbox, so to speak. She had it was her world and all her other characters, and so I went in and helped a little bit with the Kendra stuff. So it was odd, because I did feel like we had, up to that point, Kendra had been the star of all her books, and so here she was just a supporting character. It was actually
But it
fun
was
for me.
fun. It was fun.
Yeah, that was very fun to me, and we did some things later with that, her in joining in Eve's world, but that was the first time, and that was a lot of fun.
Olivia, but she did turn out to be one of my favorite characters.
funny Mom should say that. Mom wanted to kill Olivia in the very first book.
I thought it would be something wonderfully dramatic and powerful. And so we had a little discussion about that, didn't we, Raj?
That's been one of our few disagreements. Mom wanted to kill in the very first book, and I said I think I like this character, and I have other things that I want to do with her, and so we talked that out. And Mom tends to be very bloodthirsty in her books, but she didn't get a.
I didn't get Olivia. She's a best friend. She sometimes we use her to stress how evil somebody can be. We just she's become very, very important, and she's her alter ego too, because she did not have a wonderful operation. So whenever we see Olivia, she's still blind, and we see her suffering, and yet how generous she is with our heroine.
But it was very important for me, and I think Mom too, is that she grew up with Kendras. They went to this school for the blind together as children, and Kendra got this wonderful operation. Olivia did not. She's still blind, but she is incredibly capable and successful, and just a very strong person. She doesn't need to have her sight to be a very strong person, and so we actually enjoy in the books showing Olivia to have made a great life for herself, despite the fact that she doesn't have her sight as Kendra does, and that's very satisfying.
How did you two elect to handle writing the antagonists throughout the series, as Kendra, Olivia, and others have faced off with some pretty evil and ominous ones?
Well, I like a terrible villain, and that's what I go for. There's got to be punishment involved, because that's what should happen to the villain.
Well, sometimes we, when we're writing these books, we do have to write some scenes from the villain's point of view. We have to get inside his head and try to make his twisted logic understandable to the reader, while not celebrating it, but understanding it. And that's, to me, probably the darkest part of it. Is trying to understand this horrible person, and in a weird way justifying, at least in his mind, why he does the things that he does. So I agree with Mom. It's especially satisfying after having to live inside this person's skin for an entire book, to actually see him suffer and have to pay for the horrible person he is.
Yeah. Depends on how terrible he was to my characters.
I want it to be a spectacular death that causes maximum pain.
There's a payoff for the reader in that somewhere too, isn't there?
It is. They want to see this person suffer. A quick bullet isn't going to do it. It's got to be even worse. It's got to be he's got to really suffer for putting these people through this pain.
There's another character here, Jesse Mercado, who becomes so popular over a trilogy within the series, with Double Blind, Hindsight, and Blink of an Eye. What do you feel has made her such a popular member of the series cast, that she's now even got her own spin-off novel, Killer View, that Roy authored?
She's a big favorite of mine, and when I did a solo, she was introduced in the Kendra books, and I knew very quickly that I wanted to give her a solo book, a book of her own, and Mom was busy at the time with her own books. She had a couple in a row that she had to get done, and so I wrote I wrote a solo book with Jesse as the main character, and I love that, and I love Jesse, and I definitely look forward to writing some more with Jesse.
Yeah, she's a good character. It's strong.
Now, do you two have a network of law enforcement beta readers, so to speak, or longtime sources on the force that you've consulted for the various cases featured in different books over the years?
I've gone to I've do research, and sometimes like that first book, The Silent Thunder, I talked to a Russian submarine captain who was actually uh, head of the Baltic Fleet for a while when he was in Russia. Um, and I've talked to police, not the same ones each time. I've talked to police and lawyers and stuff, and that's usually been my job to consult with them when we get to a point we think we need a little bit more professional expertise.
Publishers Weekly has promised that bestsellers Iris and Roy Johansen's pulse-pounding ninth Kendra Michaels thriller will have fans and newcomers alike enthralled. What made it so for you two as you were crafting this next story that unites Kendra with Black Ops former FBI agent Adam Lynch? On the hunt for what we must say is a clever killer in More Than Meets the Eye.
More Than Meets the Eye was a story that started with a premise that we like. Very often, you'll see a murderer who might arrange to get some break on their sentencing by revealing the location of a body, their victim. And so the book starts with a serial killer who is just gone to trial. Trial obviously isn't going well, and so to keep from having a death sentence, he agrees to show the police the location of one of his victims, the burial location. And the whole team is out there, the forensics people are out, and they're getting ready to sift through. They thrust the shovel into the ground, and it blows up. It's booby trapped and kills many of the people, including the serial killer himself. And one of the people involved is an FBI agent who's a friend of Kendra Michaels. And so she investigates what happens, and it leads her into one of our favorite cases, but it involves a serial killer.
Also, it got her with Lynch again, and Lynch is one of my favorite characters. And when that horrible thing happened, it automatically drew Lynch back into the story, and it was uh, uh, it, it it was one of my favorites because it cemented their characters and their relationship. And you know me, I'm a born romantic.
In that same spirit, what did you two count as your favorite moments collaborating together on the more recent Kendra Michaels adventure, Flashback?
On Flashback, it was I like I like the animals. I'm sorry. I'm very fond of animals, and in this particular one, we not only had a really weird dog in it, uh, and but the dog was taking care of seals on this island, and so we actually blended I thought the warmth and the love that we both have for animals with these horrible death scenes and everything like that would automatically someone would expect that I thought that it was tempered by those cute little seals.
It's there are two young women. Kendra's pulled into this case when it comes to her attention that two young women have been investigating the murder of their mother from 15 years before. She was the victim of a serial killer. And these two young women, now in their 20s, are suddenly in the midst of their own investigation, go missing. And so Kendra goes and searches for them, and follow and in doing so follows the trail that these young women were doing for this to find this serial killer, who it seems is now picking this time to strike again after many years. And so there's elements of a cold case, but actually it's a very very hot case with these women and the murder seeming to have returned.
And the animals. I like the animals too on it too.
Now, Iris, when you're not writing with Roy, you still keep up an amazing pace penning solo novels, one of your latest being On the Hunt. What made that an exciting thrill ride for you to write?
On the Hunt, and it's uh, very exciting. It takes place all over the world, in Egypt and Paris, and again, it's got an animal in it. Doggone it! But this animal happens to be a dog that can tell what kind of things, blow up things and things like that. It's got all kinds of excitement, and they go after hidden treasure, that one was new for me.
Now, Roy, are you at work on the next new Jesse Mercado novel, or maybe one of your own?
Well, right now, I've been doing a lot of the early work on a new Kendra book that will be out next year. And then and I've also been doing some outlining on a new Jesse Mercado book too, that will be sometime after that. We've got a couple more Kendras to write before I get to that point.
Could you each give us a sense of what your outlining process looks like when you're working on a new book?
Well, I think probably due to my screenwriting background, I tend to be much more thorough in outlining. I leave some room to discover things as I'm writing, but I tend to want at least to have a fairly good idea of where I'm going before I even begin writing, which is totally different from the way Mom works. I'll let her explain hers.
Well, I go for the characters. I uh, I I have to uh, grab the characters within the first chapter or so, and then I have to live with them for a little bit, and then it ends up usually that they write the book, and that sounds a little weird, but it's what happens.
The Eve Duncan series, it's safe to say, has remained as popular as ever in the 2020s, with more recent hits like Smokescreen, The Persuasion, The Bullet, and A Face to Die For, which the New York Journal of Books promised was a well-structured story with lots of action that Johansen fans will enjoy. Captive, where BuzzFeed reported that Jane Maguire, an artist like her mother Eve Duncan, is holed up in a Scottish castle of her friend Earl John Macduff. Even so, her MI6 boyfriend Seth drags her into trouble with his case, following a vengeful villain. Jane and Seth flee to the Highlands of Scotland to figure out what secret the villain is after in the midst of warfare between his soldiers, MI6 agents, and Earl's Marines, and the survivor more recently. Iris, what's continued to be so enjoyable for you about spending time with these characters on the page, book in and out?
It was very exciting to bring out her skills. In fact, I still uh, on the most recent books that I've written about her, it always excites me to find out something that I didn't know, and that all of a sudden Eve knows, and she learned along the way.
Now, if you were both giving advice to the next generation of Johansens looking to follow in your footsteps, what rules of the writing road would you give them to navigate with?
Finish the book. That's what I give advice on. A lot of times you get discouraged in the middle of a book, particularly if it's difficult. But don't just throw it in the drawer and think you'll finish it next week. Just keep on with it and and, and let it write itself.
And my advice is similar to that in that don't give in to what you think might be writer's block, because I think that writers are probably the worst judge of how it's going as they're writing. If you have a day that you think you've written just 7 or 8 pages of total dreck, um, and very often the next day you'll look at it and think it's not so bad, and then you can rewrite it. So at least you got something to work with, not just more blank pages. Because very often, sometimes you could write and think you just written the greatest pages ever, and look the next day, and it is dreck. You just can't tell while you're doing it. So you may as well just write the pages. Either way, no matter how you think it's going, and at least you'll have made some progress that you can usually work with and work your way through to getting the book finished. And so that's part of what Mom was saying too. It ties into just getting it finished, and I think that's the hardest thing for beginning writers to do very often, is just to finish their book without getting discouraged.
Finally, before we go, when you two are doing a book signing together, how powerful is it to feel the connection with fans who are holding both the books you write together and Iris for you, the generations of readers who might have everything from your historical romances to the more recent thrillers in hand for you to sign?
It's absolutely wonderful. You, there's no way of explaining it. When I never take it for granted, because I have someone who comes up to me, and all of a sudden she's talking about this character that I wrote like 20 years ago, and she still remembers it, and she's excited about it, and she's talking about it as if that she'd lived with that particular character too, in my particular world.
I tell you that I actually learned a lot from doing these book signings together. And is that the affection that Mom's fans have for her characters. As a screenwriter, and even my first several books, I was more concerned with the story. And obviously, for movies, what's it about? Is people want to know before they go see it, and that's generally what I would think about before I start working on a screenplay. And I sort of carried over to my first several books, and I saw the attachment that people had to Mom's characters. That's what they remember. They don't necessarily even care what the book is about if they love these characters. And I just saw the love that they had in talking about these people as if they were friends and family to them. And that made me want to think about, like with the Kendra, we came up with the character first before we had any idea what the story was about. We spent a lot of time working on the character, and then built a story for her to move through. So it was a huge lesson to me, and something I still carry with me about creating characters that people love and want to spend time with. It never gets old. And I think if it ever got old, that would be too bad, because it's a very exciting life, and a privilege to be a writer, and it's something I always want to do.
It's exciting, and sometimes it's a little scary, and because you think, can I keep on doing that? Oh, yes, I can, because I love it.
Iris, Roy, it has been a pleasure talking today. Thank you so much for taking our time to be on About the Authors TV.